Hello there, welcome to the Rainbow Remedy. This is just a quick look at a book I wrote some years ago, which is now being published as a blog, and I shall leave the link in the description, entitled, as I said, The Rainbow Remedy. And this looks more closely at the history of light study in relation to human psychology. And at a time when we are losing connection to each other, perhaps this is a highly opportune moment to take a closer look. And so happens, after doing some research, that the very long history of light study appears to come from the Indus Valley in northern India, or what was called northern India, which is now called Pakistan. This is the Indus Valley running up here. It's just a very big river that appears to run through the Himalayas, connecting northern India with China and the rest of Eastern Asia. Now, it clearly appears that the path of knowledge, light knowledge specifically, and the science of light, followed the same route as trade paths. So that obviously would have gone this way into China, into Tibet, which has obviously got a very long history steeped in Buddhism and spiritual knowledge, spiritual study, which also encompasses Nepal, Burma, Laos, Thailand, famously full of Buddhist temples, Cambodia, Vietnam, similarly full of temples. And we can also see evidence of this knowledge travelling the other way. This is up into Mesopotamia, and this way into Israel, etc., where Jesus hung out all those years ago. So yes, the interesting part is that recent archaeological evidence has shown that the towns built some 10,000 years ago, or well in excess of that, quite possibly up to 50,000 years ago, were very well designed, showing clearly that the people that built these towns had a very good grasp of mathematics, geometry and architectural design, had flushing toilets, working sewers, etc. So then should cause us to allow us to give us the opportunity, to look a bit deeper into this subject, which excuse me, appears to at least start with the just very simple comparison to the human mind, or between the human mind and a crystal. And we can see this in this lovely little picture I've drawn here, which, as I say, depicts a crystal here in the middle, behaving in the same way that the human mind does, splitting up a singular source, light source, in order to create a highly fragmented picture on the screen, to suggest that this is the nature of human existence. We have fragmentation and separation one side of our mind and unity on the other. And in the middle here is the identification, or what ancient people would have used quite possibly to identify their soul and the existence of a human soul, insofar as the crystal creates the first blueprint and the first conception of identity before that is then projected onto the screen in all its glory. So the suggestion was very clear that the human soul can follow a very similar pathway, to suggest right from the outset that the soul can survive death. And this is what ancient people used to gain a clear understanding into reincarnation, rebirth, and surviving the physical death of the human body. And this also led to, of course, all the wealth of stories and history that we hear, from India and Asia about reincarnation, etc. And of course, this naturally led to a comparison as people looked at this and watched how it all worked. Quite literally, I mean, making a very simple, I don't know if comparison between the behaviour of rainbows and those of human beings, which would have been done quite feasibly using a crystal. And notably, actually, up in the Himalayas, it's very common that people could, or highly likely rather, that people dug crystals out of the rock, because there are so many embedded in the Himalayan rock there, and carried them around in their pockets and became little teachers, quite simply using the crystal of the opening of a cave. Now I have one hung in my window. I've drawn the curtains here, and you can see roughly, how this may have worked. You just sort of turn the crystal slightly as it turns in the breeze, and you can see rainbows sort of projected on the screen. It's all very rudimentary, but you get a sort of slight idea how ancient people may have and could have used crystals to perform that task. Now, as I say, the number of comparisons then that people could have possibly made are probably between a rainbow and a human being are highly significant, and begin with, of course, the first one, which is that we all have the hallmark of the source. Everything in the universe appears to have this hallmark of the source, which includes a signature of uniqueness on the screen, on the surface, when we are finally projected onto the screen in all our glory. Wheel of Birth and Death, a mini universe at work, which people can study at their leisure, and gain a deeper insight into our own Wheel of Birth and Death, quite simply from a crystal. And naturally, this crystal and behaviour of rainbows showed early humans how constant change, a state of constant flux and change on the screen, is the same for a rainbow as it is for a human being, and may also explain the source of duality in our universe, to suggest once a single source is split, then we have two, and two is the precursor to all the millions of pieces that arrive on the screen. Much the same as a tree starts with two leaves, which behave as the precursor to the millions of leaves that come and go in the tree's lifetime. And the interesting part here is also to note this expression of the number 3, quite simply from the source, the middle, and the surface. Source, soul, body, awake, dreaming, asleep, which was expressed as the Om sign, the oldest symbol known to mankind, which very clearly originates from the Himalayas and still carried around today by holy men in abundance. Now, clearly the oldest symbol known to mankind, the Om symbol, is comprised of 3 C's representing the 3 levels of mind. First C, the unified source. Second C, the soul and the mind. Third C, the screen and the body. To suggest that from the source comes the soul, like so, and then from the soul comes the body. So this bit, very importantly, comes off the second bit, the second C. The third C is an extension of the second C, and should not be coming from the middle or even above, which is clearly wrong. And the crescent moon and the dot, as I've explained here, suggest that our source is independent of separation, which is quite beautiful, untouched by any form of separation in its true essence. Now, if we have a look back here, can see all these, this is in the blog, significance of the number 7, all these similarities that ancient people would have noticed between a rainbow and a human being. And the other thing I have identified in this blog is the incredible similarity, or the incredible similarity between DNA and a crystal. Quite simply, if we extract DNA from our body cells and dry it out, it behaves as a crystal. and appears as a crystal. So if we have a quick look down here at where DNA comes from, it's the nucleus of our body cell. This is a body cell, and this is the nucleus, and inside the nucleus is the most important thing we possess, which is our DNA, and quite rightly protected at the core of each cell inside our body. The interesting part is this is the DNA here, and of course this is the part that we can extract and dry out and behaves as a crystal. Now, if you like, you can have a look online. I believe is just have a quick look here. Actually, perhaps I don't know. Let me just go up here. Let's pop in here. DNA crystal. We see here, this is astonishing. This is literally DNA crystals formed from a double helix suspended liquid. This is just scientists taking pictures of DNA crystal, and this is just dried out DNA. And the incredible thing about it is that we can store more information on a gram of DNA than any other substance known to mankind. And for that reason, businesses have already patented DNA crystal with a view to using them inside industrial-sized computers. And we use DNA quite simply to remember video footage of our entire lives and perform virtually every task that the human mind performs. And this has been studied by a Russian scientist, Dr. Pop, who noted that DNA crystal, of course, works on light, that it uses light to perform every action in the cell. So here's your nucleus here, and it's literally beaming out light energy to every component in the cell, conducting thousands, millions of reactions a second, all managed by different light frequencies. Much the same way perhaps as internet or anything else like that. And this is indeed what you might call nature's internet, and how cells communicate with other body cells, and how the whole body functions upon this basis of light. And as I say, this has been studied in some depth actually by this scientist Dr. Pop, who quite clearly states that the human body is a being of light. And all his experiments confirm that. And I won't go into too much depth here, but basically the 90% of DNA we were told, of course, is junk DNA, is very, very busy, and it very clearly appears to use light. Now this, as I say, shines a new light on the topic known as the journey of our soul. And of course the possibility that, as I just mentioned earlier, that our soul reincarnates not just once, but hundreds, maybe thousands of times, in order to grow, evolve and learn. And the task that the soul appears to have been given is to learn about mind. As simple as that. Now, just as I say, this was all indicated by this picture here. And let's have a look here. Yes, this was Journey of the Soul was spoken about by Buddha allegedly in terms of a lotus flower, quite simply because the beginning of the journey at the bottom of the lake was in dark, murky conditions. This is right at the bottom of the lake, where the seed would struggle for many lifetimes to reach its way toward the light. And of course it's very hard to see any point or purpose to one's life at this dark early stage. Now, as the soul grows in awareness of the human mind, then it reaches the point where it can ultimately release itself from mind, which there are little spots of pollen being released here, which I believe Buddha called it the release or the blowing out. There's a word in India which clearly refers to the release of souls from the mind, much like pollen from the lotus flower, which of course is the ultimate destiny, I guess, for the soul. And the interesting thing about that is that this was studied in conjunction with the stars and astrology. So if we look here at the science of light, Jyotish from India, we notice that immediately there's a reference to astrology, an introduction to Vedic astrology, basically suggesting that yes, the birth of the soul comes at a certain planetary, certain planetary positions, which you could call your birth chart, and your soul, the body dies, and the soul then has the possibility perhaps to be reborn under a different birth sign in order to learn a new set of lessons which are best suited to that particular sign. So it might be one lifetime you're born as a Gemini, another one as a Leo, which is more expressional, and etc. Depending on the lesson that we have to learn that lifetime would depend on the position of the stars and the influence, etc. Which, yes, therefore suggests that astrology and the science of light were both studied together as one subject, which is quite fascinating, literally in universities, as one of the most important subjects that a human being could study, quite simply because it helped us overcome our greatest obstacles and understand the biggest mysteries in the universe. Now, with that in mind, it's also interesting to note that Western scientists have identified, this is the source, which ultimately I believe this is what the soul, realizes when it releases itself from mind, is to just return to source and recognize its original identity, which, as I say, Western scientists have now looked at and described from a scientific point of view. This is when looking at matter, that there is in fact nothing solid in it. It behaves as energy waves when it's magnified to nth degrees, and it's basically just energy waves in empty space, to suggest that at source everything, even in the material world, is just energy that our minds interpret as being solid. And there's various ways of expressing this, such as here, light energy condensed to a slower vibration, at which point the energy waves begin to gel together to assume a shape and form detected by our senses. We are extensions of source energy, therefore, and you begin to get a feel for the unity. And I've just skimmed through here just to now there's a beautiful little quote here. This is from the guys in the Himalayas. I don't know if I've got this on my screen, I believe so. This is a verse from an old Vedic scripture that says that very clearly indicates that ancient people were very reluctant actually to use words for our source. They understood that words are perfect for the screen, where we have jobs to do and we can measure and calculate things, but actually as we go deeper, words become more and more impotent. And this was expressed in such verses as this, where they use the word that to express the source, a pointing word rather than a descriptive word, or any kind of label word or a name. That which is radiant, subtler than the subtle, very subtle but still magnificent, that from which all worlds and their inhabitants are supplied. That which is indestructible, that alone is to be struck. Strike it, my good friend. Absolutely beautiful, and it gives you a little insight into how these people, what these people were thinking, how they lived, what they studied, and the roots of human psychology, which is so poorly understood today. All we see today is mental illness, an extremely poor understanding, of the human mind, how it works, a great deal of mistrust and war and fighting, anxiety, terrorism, and when you consider the fact that ancient humans appeared to be fully in touch with these things, then it's quite sad to see how far we've fallen behind. Now, yes. Just to finish, I'd like to remind you, a teacher is a light, nothing more, nothing less, able to illuminate subjects we were not able to previously see. And this, I think, yes, is an extremely important concept that, again, is misunderstood today. No coincidence that the world's best teachers have so often spoken about enlightenment in all its various forms. For the light will help us to see. The light is the truth is the light, and the truth shall set us free. And I think I'm running out of time. Thank you for your attention, and please enjoy the blog.